Okay, good evening. We are going to start our first Zoom meeting, and this meeting will center on Chapter 6. And so, as you should be well aware from reading the course plan and/or syllabus, we will be covering Chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And approximately we'll be devoting about 3 weeks to each chapter. Everything is laid out very clearly in your course plan, and you can see what the flow of the course is. So at the beginning of each chapter, there will be a Zoom meeting on what you need to know in the chapter, what's important for doing the homework. As you can see, there's quite a lot of homework on Connect, okay, the software platform for our textbook. And then there will be a test on Blackboard at the end of the chapter or unit, approximately one test every 3 weeks. In Chapter 10, there will be no Chapter 10 test. We'll just go to the final. So you're going to have 4 chapter tests. So these presentations should also help you for the test. And so what we want to look at when we look at our textbook or the information in there are 3 sections. One is called Comunicación, and that has to do with idiomatic ways of speaking in Spanish. These sections are very simple, but this is what they want you to know for that particular unit. So we'll look at Comunicación. Next, we'll look at the vocabulario for the chapter. And every chapter is themed. So this chapter is themed about foods, okay? And it will prepare you on how to order foods if you're at a restaurant. So first identifying, talking about foods, and how would we order food, and talk about a dining experience. And then finally, there's a third section we're going to look at is estructura, structure or grammar. Okay, and that will be the grammar. And so I'm going to go over these areas because these are the most relevant for us. So if we go to chapter 6 and page 165, okay, and we will see comunicación. And what are we going to look at here? It says como no, and it says responding to requests. So they want us to learn some phraseology that we can use. Many of you may already know this from Spanish 101, and it's very basic Spanish, but just what kind of phrases would you use? And again, since we're dealing with food, the idea would be here, if somebody asks you if you would like to eat something, or how might you respond to such a request? So they give you an exercise here. They kind of run you through how various speakers in different countries might respond. You can go through these exercises and do them on your own. And then they will include a little box, okay, explaining things in detail. So let's look at this box. And so this is what they want us to know. So give me a second here. And so let's take a look at the box here in Comunicación on page, now we're on page 166. If someone invites you to do something or offers you something, here's what you might say if you want to accept. Okay, so real basic Spanish. Yes, please, sí, gracias. Or you could say, si no es molestia. I mean, you don't hear that a lot, but you could say that if it's not a bother. Okay. What else? So again, somebody might ask you if you would like coffee. ¿Quieres un café? And then you could say, sí, gracias, or you could say, sí, no es una molestia. This is really basic stuff. There will be some questions on your tests like this, and I don't think it's really difficult. And then let's move on here, and just take a quick look. You can also use any of these expressions which convey the English "sure, no problem, of course" to respond in the affirmative. So, claro que sí. Yes, of course, in a way. Como no, the same thing. How not? I mean, it's like they both mean the same thing, like yes, of course. Con mucho gusto. is kind of like gladly, with mucho gusto, okay? Like gladly, which with much desire, or por supuesto, of course. These can all be used interchangeably. So, for example, let's look at a question. Again, you're in a food setting. Somebody might say to you, "Me traes un café, por favor?" If you remember the verb traer, and we see it has an S ending. So, can you bring? Traer is to bring. Can you bring me a coffee, please? And you might say, "Yeah, of course. Sí, cómo no?" Or "Claro que sí," or "Con mucho gusto," or even "Por supuesto." And then you might want to respond, "Gracias," once they make that offer. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much more time here, but it's pretty straightforward. You will be asked some questions on your exam about this, and you'll see some of this in your homework. Okay. Here's another section of comunicación. Again, phraseology, idiomatic ways of speaking that you might want to use when you're being invited to do something. Say you're invited to do something, and you want to invite someone to do something, or what if you're in the position where you want to decline an invitation? Okay, again, this could be surrounding food. So let's take a look. And again, we're going to this box here. And this is on page 167. Just to go back, there are other exercises you can do here, and I encourage you to go through them. I'm just trying to go to what I consider the most important part of the lesson, okay? So in any event, we're now on page 167, and we want to know, how do we invite someone to do something, or eat something, or drink something, or how might we decline an invitation to do so? So uh, 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 to ask someone if they want to do something, you can use the verb querer. We should all know this from Spanish 101, the verb to want. And now remember, in Spanish, when you're using you with somebody, you got to think, which you am I going to use? Do I use the familiar you, tú, or do I use the formal you, usted? And if it's friends or family, you'll use tú. If it's someone you don't know, for example, in this case, might be a waiter, waitress, um, you would use usted. In certain Latin American families, children would use usted with adults. But usually you use tú within the context of a family, and usted is used for people that you've really not been introduced to. It's just a full polite form of you. And so if you were at a restaurant, you'd probably be asked by the waiter or waitress with usted. But let's take a quick look. So if you want to ask somebody if they want something, you could just say quieres or quiere, and whatever it is. ¿Quieres un café? Do you want coffee? Or we could say, ¿quieres un postre? Do you want dessert? Here's one. ¿Quiere usted un sándwich? Do you want a sandwich? And you can go through these. Um, there are many ways to invite someone to do something. So you might want to ask someone to do something. So you don't want to you're not asking somebody if they want a thing, but do they want to do something? So you would use querer and then the infinitive. So do you want to go? ¿Quieres ir? The usted form would be quiere ir. Quiere usted ir? Again, you conjugate the verb querer, okay? Quieres, and then you use the infinitive after it. ¿Quieres ir al restaurante? Do you want to go to the restaurant? Okay. Um, Here's another one. Tener ganas de. Tener ganas de is usually used with a verb, but you can use it with a noun. So ganas here means like desires. So you could ask somebody, do you have desires of pizza? In other words, do you feel like pizza? ¿Tienes ganas de pizza? Or if you want to use usted, ¿tiene usted ganas de pizza? In this case, or cerveza. All right. You, as I said, often use tener ganas de with a verb. So tienes ganas de pedir una pizza. And tener ganas again means to have like desires of or to feel like. Do you feel like pedir, if you remember that verb, is to order, okay, or request? Do you feel like ordering una pizza? And notice that with tener ganas de, when you use it with a verb, you do not conjugate the verb. You use the infinitive. So, tienes ganas de pedir una pizza, or tiene ganas, if you use usted, de pedir pizza. Here it is. ¿Tiene usted ganas de tomar algo? Do you feel like drinking something? Okay, so tomar can mean take or drink. Another phrase is parecer, the verb parecer, to appear. So let's take a look at it. ¿Qué te parece? How does it appear to you? And if you want to use usted, it's ¿qué le parece? We haven't learned the indirect object pronouns yet, but for tú, it's te, and for usted, it's le. So, ¿qué le parece? How does it appear to you? In other words, you could make this mean, do you feel like? Okay, so, ¿qué te parece una hamburguesa? Do you feel like having a hamburger? ¿Qué le parece un mango? Do you feel like having a mango? Or you could use it with a verb. ¿Qué te parece cenar en casa? How do you feel about cenar is to dine at home? How do you feel about eating in, dining at home? ¿Qué le parece, if you use usted, pedir un café? There's that verb pedir, to order. What do you feel, what do you feel about ordering coffee? Okay, literally, how does it appear to you to order a coffee? You hear this all the time. ¿Qué le parece esto? ¿Qué le parece una cerveza? What do you feel about a beer? ¿Qué le parece comer en casa? What do you feel? What do you think about eating at home? What do you feel? What do you think about eating at home? Or how do you feel about eating at home? ¿Te apetece? Apetece? Apetecer is the verb to kind of appeal to. So, does it appeal to you? And you can, again, use this with a noun or an infinitive. And here's le apetece with usted. Le apetece or te apetece. Does thus and such appeal to you? In other words, do you feel like having it or doing it? So, ¿qué te apetece un café? Do you feel like having a coffee? Le apetece un café? Do you feel like having a coffee? Or you can use it with a verb. ¿Te apetece tomar un café? Do you feel like drinking coffee? Again, when you use a verb after another verb, the second verb is left in the infinitive. Okay, so we don't conjugate. It's que te apetece tomar un café? Do you feel like, does it appeal to you to have a coffee? All right. And then finally, you might want to decline an invitation. So somebody might say, ¿quiere usted tomar un café? And if you don't want to, you would just be polite. You would say no, but you want to put on no thank you, no gracias. And then they just tell you here, if you want to be real polite and give a reason, you say you don't want to have, you don't want to drink, no gracias. You might want to say, no puedo tomar más. I've already drunk a lot and I can't drink anymore. Okay. Or you could say, I need to go home now. I can't stay. Debo regresar a la casa. Okay. So basically, though, those are very basic statements. Just make sure you feel comfortable using them. You're going to be asked a few questions on your test, and you should see them in your homework. And now we can move out of um, um, the comunicación section, and we can move into vocabulario, okay? And which starts on page 169. And here is our food vocabulary. Most of you should know this. Hopefully you have recall of this. This is basic vocabulary from Spanish 101. And so just go through this and make sure you're familiar with different foods, because on your exam, You're gonna have to talk a little bit maybe about a restaurant you went to and what you ate there and whether you liked it or not, you know? So you should be able to say, uh, maybe what you had at a restaurant. Did you eat chicken, pollo? Did you have meat, carne, or jamón, or pescado, fish? So you should be able to talk a little bit. Did you, what about the vegetales or las verduras, the vegetables? Did you have any vegetables? Did you have an ensalada, a salad? So let's take a look at some of this vocabulary. It's really for you to go through it, but las carnes y los mariscos. So la carne, it's feminine, is meat. So meats and mariscos are shellfish, okay, such as calamares, okay, which is squid, pulpo, octopus, and camarones, shrimp. But here are some of your meat. Chorizo is sausage. Again, pollo, there's pollo with the double L, pollo, uh, carne de puerco, pork, or it's often called cerdo, pork. Okay, here are comestibles are foods. Enlatados means they're in cans. So canned foods or packed foods. For example, tuna. El atún is usually in a can. Very common food eaten throughout Latin America. El arroz. Okay, la sopa. Caldo is broth. Frijoles, very important in most of Latin America, particularly Central America and Mexico. La harina is flour, el pan, and pasta. Okay, so I don't need to go through all these. You can at your own, but here are some productos lácteos, your dairy product, and eggs, los huevos. Flan, an important postre or dessert. Queso, cheese, mantequilla, butter, la leche, milk. Here are your verduras or vegetales, broccoli, cebolla, lechuga. You make an ensalada with lechuga, el maíz, las papas. Again, I'll let you look through these on your own. Las frutas, there they are. Las fresas are strawberries, el limón, el mango, manzana, apple. Condimentos, all right, condiments such as oil, aceite, pimienta, okay. And then different drinks, bebidas, from beber to drink, el agua, la cerveza, el jugo, juice, vino, blanco, vino tinto, okay, white wine and red wine. Okay, so you can look through some of this. There's some more vocabulary. Just take a look through it. The word for mushroom, hongo, horchata, and they give you some different words. For example, in some countries in Latin America, mostly you call a strawberry a fresa, but in some places it's called frutilla. Okay, a chili could be a chile or a pimiento or an ají. I hear all three used, even amongst the same group of people. All right, so these are just different ways to say a banana could be a plátano, a banana, or a guineo. Again, I've heard all three used. It just depends on the region. But you don't need to learn all of these alternate ways of speaking. Okay. Now, when you let's look at the different meals in the day. Okay, again, you should know all these, but just a quick review. Las comidas, or meals of a day. So you're going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And in Spanish, they say the breakfast, the lunch, the dinner. We don't use the definite article. They do, for whatever reason. So breakfast is el desayuno. Yo como el desayuno a las 7. I have breakfast, or I eat breakfast at 7. El almuerzo is lunch, y la comida is your meal, your dinner. Okay, or better yet, cenar is to have dinner, and la comida just means food. Okay, so el desayuno is breakfast, and the verb related to it is desayunar, to have breakfast. El almuerzo is lunch. Almorzar is the verb to have lunch. Yo almuerzo, it's a stem changer, if you recall. Comida means food, comer is to eat, la merienda is a snack, and merendar is to have a snack, and finally, to have dinner. Dinner is la cena, and the verb is cenar. And I think that's pretty good. Okay. And again, there's some foods that you should start to remember. Camarón is shrimp. El pan is bread, and el pescado. There's pescado, fish. Ajo is garlic. Jamón, very common, eaten throughout Latin America and Spain. Aceite de oliva, olive oil. And here on naranjas, frutas, naranjas, oranges. Okay, let's take a look and see what is next here. En la mesa. Now I'd like you to look at this section en la mesa on page 173 because you will be asked on your exam the vocabulary for silverware, the items you would find at table, cups, dishes, glasses, like a glass of water. How do you say that? So please make sure you take a look at this section and you're just refamiliarize yourself with these words. So for example, we have the word taza. Taza is generally, it's a cup that you would use for a hot beverage like coffee, chocolate, or tea. Vaso is a glass, like for a cold drink. Un vaso de agua, okay? Un vaso de jugo. Bowl, cuchara is a spoon. Cuchillo is a knife. The word for plate or dish is el plato. Napkin, servilleta. Fork, el tenedor. So please look through that. There are some more. Look through these, okay? And they refer to this, all the items at table is the place setting or el cubierto. Okay, so these would be your cubiertos, the things that you would find at table, all the vessels and silverware that you would find. Here is some more, a little more vocabulary, again, associated with food. You might want to take a look at it. For example, how would you say something is sweet? It would be dulce. Something is fried, frito, spicy, picante. You might want to take a look at that. Asado, roasted. Okay. Now, this is important because you may have a reading or you might have a section on your test where you're at restaurant or you may need to write about it or listen to something. So when in a restaurant, you can use pedir. Oh, there's also the verb ordenar. Ordeno or pido is to order something. To order food is pedir. Okay. The waiter or waitress is a camarero, camarera, or a mesero, mesera. And you can ask for la carta or el menú. Normally I ask for el menú, but either one is fine. So let's take a look here. You get to a restaurant, the waitress might ask you, ¿sabes qué vas a pedir? If she wants to use the tú, or the person with you might use the tú form with you. ¿Sabes qué vas a pedir? Do you know what you are going to order? And then you might say, no, es mi primera vez en este restaurante. No, I don't. This is my first time in this restaurant. Tengo que, I have to ver la carta. I need to see the menu. Bueno, yo voy a pedir una hamburguesa. Well, in any case, yo voy a pedir, I am going to order a hamburger. So here is a typical menu or carta, right? This would be more of what they would call la carta. Quite honestly, in Latin America, and whenever I'm in a Spanish-speaking place, the general menu is referred to el menú, but your book does make a distinction between a carta and a menú. a menu for your book is going to be a price fixed menu with a first course, a main course, and a dessert, and possibly a drink, all included for one specific price. That's a menu. And a carta would be, you can pick and choose if you want a first course or an appetizer, aperitivo, and then what you want for your main meal, the segundo plato, and then you can pick out your sides, acompañamientos, okay, or acompañantes is the way I usually refer to them, but those would be your sides. So you put together what you're going to eat. It's not a price fixed menu, it's a carta. And so this would be the example of a carta. You're going to be asked about this on the test, and it's explained here in the Conéctate al Mundo Hispano. And I just wanted you to make sure you take a look at that. And that's on page 174. Just read through that because there is a reference. This will come up on your test. That there's this distinction between a menu with a fixed price, rigid menu, and then a typical carta where you order a la carte. Okay. All right. One of the things I want to point out too, appetizers. How do you say appetizers? There's different ways, different terms to say appetizer. Aperitivos, entradas, entrantes, botanas, or tapas. This is a little bit extra vocabulary they give us. Okay. Now let's move on. Okay. Okay, I think we've covered the vocabulary. Now, finally, we get to the estructura, and this starts on page 176. Okay, so let's get to page 176. Now, when you get the estructura, they say reciclaje, they're going to bring up old grammar. You can go through this, but that's not what they're teaching here. But it doesn't hurt. It's teaching you how to form the present tense of a verb. Okay, the present indicative tense. How would you say I eat, you eat, I order, he orders, you order? That you should have learned in Spanish 101. It's just telling you to review that. But now it's going to go into the actual lesson. What are they going to teach us? What do they expect us to know here in 6.1? What do they expect us to know? The preterite tense. And now this is probably the first time you've had it. It's called the preterite tense, and it's just the simple past. Now, up until now, we can say things in the present tense, but we haven't learned how to say things in the past tense. And there's many forms of the past tense. This is just a simple past. Normally a verb in English with an ed ending. I walked. Okay. Yesterday they washed their clothes. Okay, so it's usually we think of it with an ed ending. It's the simple past, and they give you a reading, and you can look through it, and then they give you a reading written in the preterite, and they want you to get the feel of it before they explain what it is. So you might want to look through that. Then they ask some questions. But what we want to go to right away is the section called Actividades Analíticas. This now explains to us what we need to know. This will explain to us what the preterite tense is. Okay, so they're going to tell us here in number 1, this tense is used when you want to portray an event as happening at a specific point in the past. And they're going to go through and they're going to show us how to conjugate in the preterite. Okay, so I'm just going to jump through this. So if you remember, whenever we conjugate a verb in Spanish, if we're not a native speaker, we get the stem of the verb and we add on the ending, okay? And each subject pronoun, namely yo, tú, él, ella, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas, they require a specific ending that we add to the stem. Remember this? So this is all we're going to do here. So when we want to put a verb into the preterite tense, we got to get its stem, which is real simple, and add on the endings. And that's what you're going to have to learn. What ending goes with yo? What ending goes with tú? What ending goes with nosotros? Now, verbs in Spanish, there's 3 classifications, right? In English, verbs can end in any combination of letters. In Spanish, a verb either ends in an AR, ER, and IR. And we love this because this gives us order. We can classify. And once we have an AR, ER, IR verb, then we know what endings to put on. So let's take a look. How do we conjugate AR verbs in the preterite tense? Well, the verb they want us to use here is trabajar, to work. So we get the stem of trabajar. How do we get the stem of any verb? We drop the ending, the AR, ER, or IR ending. So for trabajar, our ending becomes trabaj. All right? So it's yo trabaj, tú trabaj, él trabaj, nosotros trabaj, vosotros trabaj, y ellos trabaj. By the way, I'm not going to go into vosotros. It's a conjugation that is not used in Latin America. Maybe 1 or 2 spots in Latin America, it's not used there, or really in the Spanish-speaking world at all, except for Spain. So we'll just use ustedes instead of vosotros. So let's go ahead now. So we're going to conjugate trabajar in the past tense. So I want to say worked. I worked, you worked, we worked. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, we have to put on these magical endings. You've got to commit these to memory if you don't already know them. For yo, if I want to say I worked, I take the stem and I add on an E with an accent mark. Trabajé, trabajé. So right now, trabajé I know means I worked. What about tú? I add on aste. Tú trabajaste. What about he or she? Ella trabajó. That means she worked. And what about we worked? It's amos, trabajamos. Notice that trabajamos could mean we work or we are working. It's the present conjugation, but it's also the past. And you could just tell from context whether it's the past or present form. And finally, what about ellos and ellas, they, or you all, ustedes? Ustedes is you all. It will be auron. Ustedes trabajaron el lunes. You guys worked. You all worked on Monday. Ustedes trabajaron. Or they worked. Ellos trabajaron el lunes. There's your endings. What about ER and IR verbs? This is excellent. ER and IR verbs, again, you take the stem of the verb, which we all know how to form, and they all have the same ending. Okay, so for the preterite. So let's take the verb aprender, an ER verb. So we take the stem is aprend, 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 aprend. What is the ending? It's going to be E. Yo aprendí, I learned. What about tú? It's going to be iste. Tú aprendiste, you learned. He learned is él aprendió, yo, and we is going to be imos, aprendimos. And finally, ustedes aprendieron, it's ieron, or they learned is ellos aprendieron. And again, the same endings go for IR verbs. So let's take escribir. I wrote, I take the stem, escrib. I wrote would be yo escribí. You wrote would be tú escribiste. He wrote is él escribió. We wrote escribimos, and they wrote is ellos escribieron. Very simple. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and then there's just a couple things here. I'll just point them out. Number 3 in this analytic box, the preterite is often used with specific time expressions in the past. So now that we could speak in the past, we could say yesterday I did this or last night I did that. And so ayer means yesterday. Anoche means last night. So el supermercado cerró. It's all right, closed. It's got that O ending, stem from cerrar. Cerró muy temprano. It closed muy temprano, very early yesterday. Anoche cené a las 8. So cenar is the verb to have dinner. Again, you must be aware whether you're with an AR, ER, or IR verb to do this. And by now you should know. So anoche cené, that means I ate at 8 o'clock. And how do I know it's I ate at? In English, you would have to say anoche yo cené. Spanish, you don't need the subject pronouns all the time. You can tell from the conjugation that a ending means yo, cené means I ate, and that's all it could mean. Okay, let's just move on here. Here is a spelling change. Don't worry about it. If you go on in Spanish, yes, you will need to know this. When you take a verb, and this only applies to AR verbs, only AR verbs, and only to the yo conjugation, okay? When you have an AR verb and you're doing the yo conjugation, there are spelling changes. So verbs that end in a GAR, okay, it will have a spelling change. So I arrived would be yo llegué, and you have to add a U in there. Yo llegué. So the stem would normally be yeg, L-L-E-G, and then you would put the E on it, but you have to add, insert a U after the G, only for yo. Okay, and verbs that end in a C, okay, and I should say verbs whose stem, AR verbs whose stem ends in a C, like practicar, practic, the C changes to a QU. So yo practique with a QU. And then verbs that whose stem end in a Z. Again, these are only for AR verbs. The Z changes to a C. So I began is yo empecé. The Z switches to a C. C-E with an accent mark. And they give you an example there. But it only affects AR verbs, okay, that have a stem that ends in a G, a Z, okay, and a Z, a C, and a G. Okay, so just take a look at that. It's not a major moment, but I wanted to draw that to your attention. Okay. Now, finally, so that was the preterite of regular verbs, AR, ER, and IR verbs. And you can look through the rest of the exercises in here. I'm not going to spend time on that. Just by now, you should know how to conjugate any regular AR, ER, or IR verb in the preterite tense. Okay, you should know the proper ending, stem and ending. Okay. Now, we have, let's see. Okay. Let's go to page 180. Okay, to page 180. That's what I want us to see here. And okay, 1 second. Okay, so we're going to Estructura 6.2. Okay, and before we look at that, I just wanted to point out something here. This is more for your test. You'll notice that there's little small vignettes in your chapter in either comunicación, sometimes in vocabulario, or sometimes really more in vocabulario or in estructura. Conéctate al mundo hispano. And again, they will draw from these on your tests sometimes. So just take a quick look through this one, and it's talking to you about cultural differences when you're at table in, say, the United States versus in Latin America. Okay, so you might want to take a look at that and what they say. Okay, so for example, they say here Americans do not, it's not polite to keep your hands up on the table when you're at table, when you're at a dinner. You should keep your hands off your sides, only of course using them when you need to prepare or eat your food, but you don't leave your hands out on top of the table. In Latin America, it's very polite to leave your hands out the whole time while you're talking. I mean, these are just little cultural differences that they point out. Just look through it and familiarize yourself with it. It's not a major moment. What is important here is this. We're going to look at the preterite tense again. And now we're going to look at the preterite of irregular verbs. And unfortunately, a lot of our preterite verbs are irregular. You just have to learn these. So let's learn them. So let's move on. We go to actividades analíticas, and I'm not going to go through all. I'm going to go to number 1. That's what I wanted to do with you, is number 1. And so let's take a look at page 181. You need to know this. The verb ir is the verb to go. The verb ser is the verb to be. When you conjugate these verbs in the preterite tense, they're irregular and you have to memorize them. I had to learn them, you have to learn them. And now, what is weird about this? Ir means, again, to go. Ser means to be. When you put the verbs in the preterite form, they conjugate the same. So, yo fui means I went or I was. Remember, ser means to be. So you can tell from context when you hear somebody speaking, if they say fui, whether they're using it as to be or to go. And usually, if you remember from Spanish, the verb ir is always or almost always followed by the preposition a, to go to. So if you hear somebody say fui a la tienda, you know it was I went to the store, because it's fui a. But then there is ser, and so yo fui could also mean I was. So yo fui, I don't know, estupendo. I was stupendous that night. Yeah, okay. Or él fue muy bueno. He was really good. So again, learn these. It's yo fui, tú fuiste, ella fue, we were, nosotros fuimos, or we went, nosotros fuimos. And finally, ellos is fueron. Ellos fueron al cine. They went to the movies. Or ellos fueron, I don't know, molestos. They were upset. Okay. So again, here they'll show you how context can clarify when you're using these verbs in the preterite, which verb is it? ¿A dónde fueron? Well, obviously, ¿a dónde means where did you go? Fuimos al supermercado. We went to the supermarket. Fujimori, the ex-president of Peru. Okay, Alberto Fujimori fue presidente. He was the president. La fiesta fue en casa de Ana. Okay. Okay. Finally, section 2 is very, very important. These are very commonly used verbs in Spanish. Decir, to say. Estar, to be. Not ser, to be, but estar, to be, when you're giving location. Hacer, to do or make, and poner, to put or place. Let me see here. In fact, let's take a look at number 3. Take a look at 3 here. And number 3 is on page 182. You need to know these verbs, okay? And sometimes they're called J stem, U stem, and I stem verbs. And why? Well, I taught you that the way you form the preterite tense in Spanish is you take the stem of the verb and you add on an ending. And the ending you add on depends, of course, upon the subject pronoun of whoever is speaking, right? In this case, or whoever is doing the action. Now, in this case, you don't take the stem of the verb. The stems are irregular. You must learn these stems. And there's I stem, U stem, and J stem verbs. Let's learn the stems. So for decir, to say, okay, él dice, he says, but he said is él dijo. The stem is different. You just need to learn it. So the stem for decir is di, D-I-J, and then we'll learn the endings we attach later. For a star, I was in the room. Okay, so the stem isn't está, it's going to be estuve. Yo estuve en el cuarto. I was in the room. Hacer, the stem isn't as, it's is. H-I-C, the H is silent. To be able to, I was able to. It's not pod, it's pud, P-U-D. To put or place, or to turn on, like the light, poner la luz. It's not pon for the past tense, it's pus. Yo puse la luz. Tener, very important verb, to have. Don't want to say I had. I don't use ten, stem 10, I use tuv, it's a U stem. And finally, traer, to bring. It's a J stem verb, and the stem is not tra, tiare, it's tra with a J, tra. Okay? All right, so, and so what you will do in this case is you need to add the endings for these verbs. So what are the endings for these irregular verbs? This chart isn't completely filled out, but if you look at it, it will give you the endings. So for yo, the ending will be an E, an E. So we know the stem for yo, for decir, is a D-I-J, right? It's di, so yo dije. And so it's D-I-J-E. Okay, so that is the ending that goes with yo when you are using these stem changing verbs. In other words, the ones outlined here in number 3. Okay, let's move on. What is the ending for tú? It's iste. Dijiste, you said. What about él or ella? It's going to be an O, dijo. And notice there's no accent mark, as there was with the regular verbs. For nosotros, it will be imos, dijimos, we said. And for they, ellos dijeron. Now, and this is only for verbs that have a J in their stem. The ending will be E-R-O-N, so it's dijeron. But most of our verbs that we learn in this section don't have a J in the stem, and their ending will be ieron. So for a star, the stem is estuv. They were would be ellos estuvieron. But if there is a J in the stem, it's you drop the I and it's dijeron. That's all you need to know. And they explain that to you here. And which verbs have a J in them? For the irregulars, decir and traer. There it is, tra and dich. So for the ellos form of this verb, it's not going to be I-E-R-O-N, it'll be E-R-O-N. Okay, so again, here's a star. What is the ending? It's got a stem change. For yo, it'll be an E, estuve. What about you were, it will be estuve iste. Iste is the ending. What about he was? Él estuvo. O is the ending. What about we were? Estuvimos. Imos is the ending. And they were. Ellos estuvieron. Okay. Very important verb is hacer, to do or make. I did is yo hice. Yo hice. You did was tu hiciste. Iste, you put is the stem and you add on iste. This is just a spelling change. The he did is el hizo, and the C changes to a Z there, but don't worry about it. What about we? It's going to be hicimos. Imos is the ending. And finally, they did is hicieron. Ellos hicieron. Here's poner. Again, the step is not pon, it's pus. So I put would be yo puse. E is the ending. For two, it'll be iste. Pusiste, I put. She put is ella puso. And we put is pusimos. And finally, they put is pusieron. Okay. So there are your irregular stemmed verbs, and I mean irregular stems for the preterite. They are there, they are in all their glory. Decir, to say, estar, to be, hacer, to do or make, poder, to be able, poner, to put a place, tener, to have. Ayer, tuvimos, we had a nice day. And for traer, trajeron, ustedes, did you bring the food? Okay. Again, you can look through these, spend a little time getting familiar with them. Those are your stem changing preterites. Try to get comfortable with them. The stem changes, you should know how it changes, and the endings are a little bit different from the regular preterite endings. Finally, we can now move to the last section of estructura or grammar, and this is on page 184. And what is this about? It's about direct objects and direct object pronouns. So we just have to identify the direct object in a sentence and then replace it with its direct object pronoun. This is pretty easy. Again, they start with a reading using direct objects and direct object pronouns, but without explaining anything to you. You can go through there and look at it. But then they have a box here on actividades analíticas, and this is what we really want to look at. This explains what a direct object is and how we derive them. So let's go through this. And this starts at the bottom of page 184, goes through 185 and 186. Let's take a quick look. So in the examples above, there's the word lo and la, and these are pronouns, okay? And they could either mean it or him or her, okay? These are pronouns. So, for example, I can say, I see Betty. Betty is the direct object. What's the direct object? It's the noun in the sentence that receives the action of the verb. I see Betty. Or he eats the dessert. The dessert would be the direct object. Well, what if I want to say, I don't want to have to use Betty's name. I've been using it a lot. I've been talking about her. And now I want to just say, I see her. That's your direct object pronoun. And how would you say her? What is the direct object pronoun that would stand for Betty? It's la. You can just start to learn them now. Now, what if I say, I eat the dessert? Yo como el postre. But I've been talking about the postre the whole time, and I just want to say, I eat it. Well, how would I say it? Postre is el postre. It's masculine and singular. So it would be lo. Okay. And so that would mean it. Yo lo como. So let's take a look. So you use these direct object pronouns to avoid repetition. You don't want to keep on saying the full name of the person, or you don't want to keep on saying the dessert this, or I ate the dessert, I saw the dessert, she made the dessert. Sometimes you just want to say it. Okay. So the direct object is the person or thing upon which the action of the verb is performed. Circle the direct object, and then note how it is replaced by lo or la. Okay, so look at this one. Los españoles encontraron, look at the aron, encontrar is to find, so found. The Spanish found el chile, the pepper, in Mexico. Now we want to say they found it in Mexico. Well, Chile is el chile. So we learned that it, when the thing is singular and masculine, is lo. So los españoles lo encontraron en Mexico. Now, it's saying the Spanish found it in Mexico. So now I'd like to tell you another thing. Indirect object pronouns are always placed before the conjugated verb. In English, they're always placed after. So that might have confused you here. So in English, you would say, los españoles encontraronlo en Mexico. Not in Spanish. When there's one verb, the indirect object always is placed immediately before the verb. Nothing can come between the indirect object and the verb. It's lo encontraron. Let's look at the next one. Los españoles llevaron la papa a Europa. Look at aron, past tense of llevar, to carry or took. The Spanish took the potato to Europe. Now, potato is la papa, and we want to say it. It's singular and feminine, so it will be la. So, los españoles la llevaron a Europa. Notice it's now la is the way to say it, and it always comes immediately before the conjugated verb. Let's look at another one. Veo a mi hermano todos los días. I see my brother every day. And I don't know if you remember, but whenever a human being is the object of a verb, there's veo is the verb. You have to put an a, the personal a, before it. I see my brother every day. So now I want to say, I see him every day. Well, what would be the word for him? Singular masculine. Him becomes lo. So lo can mean him or it, and la can mean her or it. So I see, since it's my brother, it'll be lo, him. Lo veo. Notice it's not veo lo, it's lo veo. The indirect object always comes immediately before the conjugated verb. We could have said yo lo veo, but it's not necessary. And what you will see when you're using object pronouns, you'll often start a sentence with the object pronoun, like lo como todos los días. I eat it every day. In English, you would have to say yo lo como todos los días. In Spanish, you don't have to, because como means I eat. Same thing here. I can say yo lo veo todos los días, or lo veo todos los días. I don't need the subject pronoun. So that can be a little discombobulating when you're learning how to work with these. All right. All right. Here's one. Gustavo conoce muy bien a Marisela. Gustavo knows Marisela well. Now we want to say Gustavo knows her well. Gustavo la conoce muy bien. Okay. Let me see. Here's one. Encontré este libro en la biblioteca. So what did I say here? Look at the ending. I found this book in the library. Now I want to say I found it. Well, I could say yo lo encontré, or simply lo encontré. Why lo? The it, because book is singular and masculine. Okay. You can have a plural indirect object. So I could have the books, the desserts, okay? So I need the books, necesito los libros. Now, if you want to get rid of the word and replace it with the direct object pronoun, you want the direct object pronoun for them, the books. So I need them would be yo los necesito. them, the way you say them, for a masculine plural item is los. And let's say it was the brothers, if they're human beings. I see them, it would be, or I need them, los necesito. So los can mean them, the brothers, them masculine, plural, or items or things. I see them or I need them, los necesito. Finally, mi amiga conoce a Ana y Luisa. My friend knows Ana and Luisa, or my friend knows them. What is the plural them there? It'll be las, okay? And if it was a, if you were talking about things, okay, so yo necesito, whatever, it was something that was feminine. Las comidas, I need the foods. I could say las necesito. So them, if the thing that you're replacing is feminine plural, you use las. If it's masculine plural, you use los. But always look at your direct object, see if it's masculine or feminine, singular or plural. If it's masculine singular, you will use lo to sub it out, him or it. If it's feminine singular, uh, you will use la to sub it out. That could mean her or it. If it's a plural item and it's masculine, you'll use los for them. And if it's, or if it's people, men, or the people you are subbing out are masculine, you would use los. So again, los could mean them, masculine, referring to more than one person that is masculine, or more than one item that is masculine. And if you're referring to more than, if you want the them for feminine items, things that are feminine and plural, you would use las. And again, if you're referring to people that are feminine, that more than one, you would use las. And you can take a look also at this chart they give you on page 185, okay? So the indirect object pronoun for me is me. So he sees me would be él me ve. And again, I have to put the me before the conjugated verb. He sees me, él me ve. Okay. Él te ve, he sees you. He sees him. Él lo ve, he sees her. Él la ve. He sees it. Él lo ve. He sees it, feminine singular. Él la ve. He sees us. Él nos ve. And then he sees them, the brothers. Él los ve. He sees them, the desserts. Él los ve. He sees them, the sisters. Él las ve. He sees them, las plumas, the pens. Él las ve. And you can look at some of these examples. Me conoces. Okay, conoces, do you know me? Me conoces. Again, you always have to put your object pronouns immediately before the conjugated verb. Nothing can come between them and the verb. And the person says, perdón, no te oí. I didn't hear you. Marta nos invitó a una fiesta. Martha invited us to a party. Okay. All right. You can take a look at 4. When you have more than 2 verbs, you can put the pronoun, the direct object pronoun, immediately before the conjugated verb, lo puedo. So here it says, puedo encontrar el libro en la biblioteca. Can I find the book in the library? Yes. Can I find? Yes, I can find it in the library. I can find it in the library. Lo puedo encontrar en la biblioteca. Always right. But since we have 2 verbs, poder and encontrar, we can attach the object pronoun, the direct object pronoun, to the end of the infinitive. Puedo encontrarlo. You won't be tested on this, but I just wanted to show you this here. But it can be said either way. But there must be 2 verbs. And in your examples on the exam, I believe they're only going to give you one verb. So you're always going to be forced to put the object pronoun immediately before the conjugated verb. Okay. Okay, and you can take a look at 5, and then finally, let's move on here. Okay, so there's various exercises you can do here with the direct pronoun, but basically, this is, I think, a pretty straightforward unit. The only other thing I don't like to go into too much down rabbit holes. I think we understand the basic concept of the direct object pronoun, how to use it in the plural when the item is masculine, and how to use it in the plural when the item is feminine, how to use it in the plural when the item is masculine singular and feminine singular. I think we understand that. Here's just another little note, though, in 5, that in addition to being used to mean it, okay, and him or her or them, the pronouns lo, la, los, and las may be used to refer to people that you're addressing as usted, okay? So if you are talking to somebody and you're using usted, this formality, and it's a woman, you could say, mi madre conoce a usted. My mother knows you. Or you could say, or you could say, mi madre la conoce. My mother knows you. Why? Here the U stands for a feminine person, okay, female. That's singular. And likewise, if I'm speaking to a man, I could say, mi madre conoce a usted, señor. Or I could say, mi madre lo conoce. My mother knows you. And if they're plural, if it's plural ustedes and they're all masculine, it'd be los, mi madre los conoce. And if it's plural feminine, and we mi madre las conoce, my mother knows you all. All right. Okay. So I think that does it for chapter 6. Okay. So again, go through the comunicación section, get yourself familiar with those terms mean. Look through some of that material I didn't cover, but look in those boxes where they describe how to use those phrases that they give you in comunicación. Go through the vocabulary, just refresh it. Look at a few of those conectate sections I pointed out on the menu, el menú y la carta, and on difference between American habits at table and Latins, their habits at table. And then finally, look at the grammar section. We learned the preterite tense of regular verbs, AR, ER, IR, stem, and ending. You should know the endings for AR verbs and the special endings for ER, IR verbs. And then we learned the irregular verbs. Ir and ser, you just must memorize the verb to go and the verb to be. And then we learned the stem changing verbs, and there were about 7 of them there, okay? And so, yes, we take the stem, but we must change it, know what it's either an I stem, U stem, or J stem verb. And then we add on a special endings, which is outlined there in your book in 6.2. Make sure that you're familiar with those. I think the exam in 3 weeks is pretty straightforward, and you will have to write a little bit, very, very small, about a past eating experience you had where you ate. So it's good to know a little bit of how to use the preterite tense and talk a little bit about food. You'll be listening to a few passages, and then the rest will be just short answer, a very straightforward type of situations. I don't think that the final, I'm sorry, the chapter 6 test is that difficult. But please keep up with your assignments. As you know, Your assignments are due on Sundays by 11:59 p.m. So if you go to your course plan or the syllabus, but probably the course plan is better, all your assignments that will be due this coming week or at the end, really on Sunday, they're going to be due at the end of this week on Sunday. And those assignments are found on Connect. You should be able to click on the assignment and start those immediately. Please finish them on time. This is not a fast-paced course. We have about 3 weeks to cover each chapter, and that should give you more than enough time to get the homework in a timely fashion. Okay, I think that does it for this evening. And good evening.